two things happened recently. One of them was the first major Democratic debate, and we saw 20 candidates. The results, for me, were both encouraging and disappointing for different reasons. It was disappointing because the Democrats really doubled down on the crazy, and Julian Castro definitely takes the crazy cake with his call for abortion for trans women, which, as you may know, are actually just men. So they don't need abortions, they can't have abortions. This is total incoherent insanity. But Kamala Harris was pretty close behind, going on about undocumented veterans, whatever the hell those are, and just a lot of craziness from the whole field, really. Everybody went full retard at least once. Bernie surprised me by coming out of the gate foaming at the mouth, and I was expecting a little bit more chill from him. But, Marianne Williamson surprised me in the other direction by giving like a whole, mostly lucid response before descending into gibbering insanity. And this is somebody I've been laughing at since she announced. But luckily, she is a sesquipedalian know-it-all. She's never going to be able to connect with normies, even Democratic normies, because she's just too, verbose and long-winded. And she's pretentious in the way that she talks. Buttigieg, I was kind of surprised that he made it through several responses without going off the rails, but of course he did eventually. I thought John Hickenlooper and Andrew Yang were both mostly reasonable, but of course they were low energy, uninspiring. Don't expect much from these guys. Don't expect them to take off or hold your breath or cross your fingers. I don't see these guys really going anywhere. And of course, with Andrew Yang, I've talked about him before. I don't think his signature ideas are ready for prime time. Most of his other ideas are pretty bad. He is a Democrat through and through. And, for someone who goes on and on about automation replacing jobs and obsoleting jobs and, the need to support unemployed workers or underemployed workers, then to raise his hand for decriminalizing illegal immigration is kind of, a non sequitur. There's some kind of disconnect somewhere in his thinking, or maybe he thinks he has to pander to, the Democratic base. I don't know where he is with that one, but it doesn't add up. The Tulsi Gabbard thing, I know she's a meme, and that's cool, and it's cool that she's against, perpetual war for Israel, but I just don't get the Tulsi Gabbard thing. I mean, she's full steam ahead for the gay and for illegal immigration as far as I can tell, so, I just don't see the appeal. And it seems like the battle actually shaping up right now between, within the Democratic Party is between the deep state establishment political insider camp, led by Joe Biden, and the woke, belligerent, angry activist women of color led by like Kamala Harris and Julian Castro and Cory Booker. These are not your boomer daddy's favorite successful, articulate, well-dressed, assimilated, white-presenting token minorities. These are hostile, in-your-face, eyes bugged out, spittle-spraying, chip on their shoulder token minorities with advanced degrees in critical grievance studies. And I just don't think either of these messages are really going to play well to the American people or even to the Democratic Party typical voters. And these are messages that Americans largely rejected in 2016 and probably will again in 2020. Eventually they're going to be able to start winning with this stuff again, maybe after 2024 or beyond, just because of demographics. But, this is really counterproductive for them to be doubling down on this stuff right now when it just cost them a major election. Because the Republican Party is, the token opposition. The Democratic Party is the traditional ruling party in America, has been for almost a century. And so the way that works is, they could win landslide victories Historically, they've been able to. Even now, they might still be able to. They could win landslide victories, but what that means is they're leaving parasitic rents on the table, because if you're winning a landslide victory, you could be taking more and giving less and still winning the election. You could alienate some voters by taking stuff from them or not giving them what they want and still win the election, and that would be a more profitable win for you. So, even though they're the ruling party, they've been charting the course, they've been setting the agenda, they're aiming for a narrow victory, because that's the most profitable electoral victory in a democracy. If you're getting a landslide victory, you're leaving parasitic rents on the table. And so because they're aiming for a narrow victory, sometimes they screw up. Sometimes they push too far, too fast, and they lose one. And they let the Republicans swoop in and pick up the election. And that makes it look like the Republicans are still in the game, still in the fight, when in reality they're just like a feeble show party opposition. They just make a feeble show of stopping the inexorable march of progress, or slowing it down a little bit, and that's all they're there for. The Democrats are the ruling party. They've been charting the course. They've been setting the agenda. And in the past, whenever they lost one, all they had to do to regain the initiative was to tone it down a little, slow it down a little, and then they can let their agents in the institutions and the media and the educational establishment and the academy and everywhere else, let them distribute the message a little more, percolate the propaganda out through the population, let a few more people coming up through the schools reach voting age, and just tone it down a little, slow it down a little, and win the next one. But they're not doing that. They're going totally insane. They're doubling down on all this stuff that cost them the last election, instead of toning it down and slowing it down to retake the initiative, which is what they would be doing if they're smart. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe they're high on their own supply or something like this, but that's encouraging to me, in the sense that they're working to get Trump reelected. They're not doing the sensible thing for them to retake the initiative and win back the presidency and the Congress. They're doing the opposite of that. They're doing something counterproductive that might cost them another election. They're totally going crazy, like it's the end of the world, like they're not actually the ruling party anymore, which, the last election was maybe a little bit more than just, a temporary loss to the token opposition party. It might have actually represented a bit of a course change, but they could easily retake the initiative just by doing what they've always done, which is like toning it down a little and slowing it down a little, but instead they're doubling down, they're amping it up, they're going for more crazy. And, you do have, Pocahontas and Kirsten Dunst. I didn't mention them. They're kind of positioning themselves as experienced pragmatists who kind of straddle the internal divide in the party and know what's involved in getting from here to there. But they're both just self-aggrandizing frauds and also utopian ideologues. Same as the rest of them. And all of these people fundamentally agree on some basic points. That's what I got from the debate. They all agree on gun control. They all agree on taking away people's guns, or at least restricting access to them. They agree on making everything gayer, and so far as possible, making everything gay. They agree on replacement migration, importing an endless stream of cheaper and cheaper replacement voters and replacement workers to, goose corporate profits and increase the returns on their stocks while, implementing parasitic socialist agendas that Americans won't go for. They agree on that. They agree on dysgenic redistribution, redistributing from the productive to the unproductive without any limits on, reproduction or anything like that. Basically cannibalizing the most productive and the most successful in order to subsidize the reproduction of the least productive and the least successful. And it's basically cannibalizing the future. And, they agree fundamentally about all of this stuff. So there's not really any disagreement on the fundamentals between any of these candidates. And, it's discouraging to see them double down on it It is encouraging because they're basically working to get Trump reelected, which I'm not really interested in doing at this point, seeing as, he's actually delivered on so little of what he talked about in 2016. But, that being said, I still don't want any of these clowns to get in there, and so I'm glad they're working for his reelection campaign. And then the other thing that happened recently was Vladimir Putin, ahead of the G20 summits, was talking to the press, and he basically said that liberal ideas are outdated, that they've run their course, that liberal Western democracies no longer have the power to dictate to the rest of the world. And I think he's basically right about that. He said, this liberal idea presupposes that nothing needs to be done, that migrants can kill, plunder, and rape with impunity because their rights as migrants have to be protected. He added, every crime must have its punishment. The liberal idea has become obsolete. It has come into conflict with the interests of the overwhelming majority of the population, which I think is basically correct. Like, I can't find the flaw in his reasoning. This stuff has metastasized into a malignant cancer that does run counter to the interests of the overwhelming majority of the population. And, this stuff is nonsense. These people are getting more and more divorced from reality. They're more and more sputtering and insane and incoherent and apparently high on their own supply. And, they're not even able to self-correct when it's in their own interests in terms of, achieving power to advance their agendas. And, hopefully we're seeing the death throes of liberalism. And, another encouraging thing that came out recently was there was an article in Huffpo about some polls that show that approval of LGBTQP individuals and situations is actually on the decline with young Americans, age 18 to 34. And the overall level of acceptance isn't going down yet because the older people are still getting more and more gay and degenerate, which is predictable. They're doubling down on the insanity they invested in all their lives and destroyed Western civilization with, probably for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to speculate, but at least among the younger generations, that acceptance is declining, and it's gone down in the last 2 years from 65% of people were saying they were somewhat or very comfortable with the full gamut of gay situations presented in the survey to now that's gone down to 45%. So big decline there among 18 to 34-year-olds. And I think people are kind of finally starting to get over a little bit of this stuff, although we've got a long way to go and we've got a lot of nonsense to see before sense is ultimately going to prevail. But this stuff that the Democrats are doing this election cycle that they think is going to win, apparently, even though it cost them the last election, I don't think they're going to win with it. I think that's good. But because of demographics, we are going to get back to the point where they can win with this. And this stuff, now we have major world leaders like Putin counter-signaling liberalism pretty aggressively, and we also have these sentiments kind of germinating and percolating and coming to fruition within Western societies, and it's taken off like nothing I've ever seen in the last 6 to 8 years. So hopefully by the time this stuff can win at the polls again, we'll have enough people talking about it and having these conversations and arriving at sensible points of view that we can carry them into effect. We're not going to be able to do it democratically, but there are other ways. If you like the channel, like, share, subscribe, support. Links are below.